G'day guys, I've just returned from Adelaide Uprising, which is Australia's largest 8-round super major event where I took the Vessels of Wraths and got some very interesting results with this new World Eaters detachment. So today I wanted to share those results with you in a vlog style so you can travel with me to the tournament, check out the space, and get a look at the games where I do a summary after each round about my opponent, the list, the missions, the challenges that I faced, and the opportunities that I seized. So if that sounds interesting to you, let's get stuck into the video.
Look for the Blood God.
G'day guys, I wanted to thank the team from the Army Painter for sponsoring this channel and this video. The Army Painter are donating a Warpaints Fanatic flexible triad set for every tournament game that I win. And all you have to do to go in the running to win a set yourself is comment below with which colour you would like to win if your name was randomly selected. The Army Painter are then going to go through the comments section and select people at random and send out sets of these absolutely fantastic paints. If you'd like to browse their range, there are links in the description below for where you can look at all of the amazing paints that these guys have available, pick which ones you would like to receive if you were lucky enough, and then comment that below. That's all you got to do, nice and simple. Now let's get back into the video. Alright guys, before we start, I just want to make a few caveats around the decisions behind taking the Vessels of Wrath list. If you want a little bit more information on the list itself, I did a detailed breakdown of the list in a video prior, so I'll chuck links in the description, so if you want to know more about the list that I took, that's where you can go to find that information. And now, you might be wondering, why did I take the Vessels of Wrath over the 30 Terminators in the Berserker Warband, which is the list that I've been well known for piloting. And the reason behind this is many reasons, right? And it's multiple faults. So one of them was that I've been running that 30 Terminator list for a very long time, and while I think it's very, very strong, I wanted to try something different and have a little bit more of a fun experience. When you're going to play 8 rounds back to back to back, you don't want to be playing the same thing that you've been playing for the last 6 months, right? So I wanted to mix it up a little bit and try something different, and I thought this new detachment was a perfect opportunity to have a little bit of fun. The other thing is that the Adelaide Uprising was using Games Workshop ruins, and importantly, the Games Workshop rules for interacting with those ruins in the charge phase. And basically what this means is that if your opponent is 1 inch away from the wall, you basically can't fit your base on the inside of that wall, because your base on an 8-bound is 40 mils. So if they're 1 inch away from the wall, you can't charge through, and you have to go all the way around. And Adelaide Uprising have a number of big U-shaped ruins, right? Which means if your opponent lines the inside of that U, staying 1 inch away from the wall, and you're at the top, you can't charge them from the front or from the sides. You have to go all the way around to the back. And then if a savvy opponent, they put something really scary in there like Marneus Calgar and a bunch of aggressors, and then behind it they put 5 scouts, and now your Exalted 8-bound, your 8-bound, your Terminators, your Angron, your anything, can't charge them, has to go all the way around to the back and charge scouts instead. So with this ruling in place, I knew that there was no world where World Eaters were going to win this event. It was just never going to happen. So I decided I'd take this as an opportunity to test and experiment with something a little bit different. So throughout the course of this video, you will hear me reference those terrain rules and the map packs, and you'll hear me reference my experiment that I'm working on. So keep that in mind as context throughout the course of the video. And the other thing worth noting is that I actually had quite a poor performance, going 4 wins and 4 losses. Now, a lot of people, if they had that kind of performance, they wouldn't be talking about it. They'd be a little bit embarrassed or ashamed. However, I am a very, very strong advocate for focusing on and reviewing and sort of analyzing your losses. I think you get a lot more out of doing that than you do out of analyzing your wins. Talking about your losses and understanding what caused the losses and what you could have done differently is a huge, important component of growing and developing as a player. And my way of reviewing my losses and reflecting on them is talking to you guys. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to talk about the 4 games that I won, but we're also going to talk about the 4 games that I lost. We're going to talk about things that I could have done differently, things that are challenges with the list, and things where that detachment falls short. And we're also going to talk about some of the mistakes made so that we can get a holistic view and improve together as a community. So that's a really strong theme throughout this video. So bear that in mind. This isn't a, look at me, I'm so good, I went undefeated. This isn't a, look at me, I'm a top World Eater player. This is me going, hey, let's embark on a journey together. Let's experiment with this faction, experiment with this new detachment, and see what we can cook up. So with all of that in mind, let's get into the vlog where I'm going to take you through the entire event and give you the reviews of each game, and then at the end, we'll do a little bit of a summary as well. Blog for the Blood God exclusive high quality dice. Blog for the Blood God exclusive high quality dice. Blog for the Blood God exclusive high quality dice. Hi, I'm Dean Simbeck, President and CEO of Blog for the Blood God's exclusive high-quality dice warehouse and emporium. Due to a shipping error, I'm currently overstocked with Blog for the Blood God exclusive high-quality dice, and I'm passing the savings on to you! Roll 9-inch charges, pass invulnerable saves, roll high for damage, and score lots of hits. Check out the links in the description of this video to pick up your set today. G'day guys, welcome to this vlog where I'm going to be covering my trip to Adelaide Uprising. It's currently 5:30 in the morning. I'm just waiting for Lockie and Kyle to come. They're going to be picking us up on the epic journey from Melbourne all the way to Uprising. I think that's actually them right now driving past. So they'll be meeting at the front of my joint in a moment. I'm just taking the old dog for a walk, which is part of my morning ritual, especially on tournament days. I think you put the good vibes out there into the world and they always return. So he loves his morning walk. Doesn't matter if it's 5:30 in the morning. I always get up half an hour early, take him, sniff some trees, shit in some people's gardens, and set the tone for the day. So yeah, I'll keep you guys posted throughout the trip on the various antics we get up to and the results from the events. So let's get stuck into it. Alrighty guys, there we have the end of round one for Uprising 2025. I just got paired into a good friend of mine, Dylan Cowan. He's running a really brutal Ultramarines Vanguard list. Going off memory, he had Marneus Calgar in a unit of aggressors with a apothecary. He had a big unit of Centurions. He had a big unit of Inceptors with bolters. Then he had a few small units of Inceptors. He had a unit of company champions or company heroes or something with Ventrix in it. Then he had a few units of scouts. He had that lone op lieutenant, the Phobos guy that can do all the reactive moves and shenanigans. And I think that was more or less it. Well, you've already seen what my list was. So basically the way that the game panned out, it was a 97-point win to me. And I think he got like 70 odd points. I'll put the scores up. But yeah, absolutely brutal game. The main takeaways were I had all my Jakhals, Berserkers, and my regular 8-bound were able to very successfully trade with his early pieces, his scouts, his Phobos guy, even his little 3-man Inceptor units. So basically I was able to go calling a hide my 2 units of Exalted 8-bound and my Demon Prince. I'm going to put the 3rd unit of Exalted in Deep Strike. And I'm going to consistently use your units to get charges so that I can push out these big bubbles so that you can't, use your uppy downy strat to just blast me. You're not going to get angles on my 8-bound. And I basically sat them there until turn 3. I even had an opportunity to rapid ingress on turn 2, didn't take it. I waited until turn 3. And then by turn 3, I'd removed all of his scouts, I'd removed all of his little guys, which meant I was able to send the Exalted 8-bound in. I charged the company heroes with Ventrix, wiped them out. When I did that charge, he heroiced in with Calgar's unit, but in doing so, he was only able to fight with a handful of guys. This is Exalted 8-bound charging in.
And then I fought, killed the Ventrix guys, was able to pile in and consolidate to tag his Centurions. So I've tagged them, I've killed the Ventrix guys. He's heroiced in with Calgar's unit. He killed like 2 of my guys because I was within 6 inches of the DP for the 4-up invulnerable save, so he didn't do much damage there. And then we tick over into his turn. He goes to fall back, fails his battle shock test with the Centurions, so they couldn't fall back. Then with Calgar's unit, he passes, and I use the stratagem to make them take a desperate escape test on a 1, 2, or a 3, because I was a Vessel of Wrath. And he's rolled his 12 odd dice or whatever it is for Calgar's unit and wiped the whole unit, right? It was just Calgar and 1 of his bodyguard left. All the aggressors died, and he more or less conceded at that point at the top of turn 3 because his Centurions had fallen back, so they couldn't shoot, they couldn't really do much. Calgar's unit was gone, and he's then sent his big unit of Inceptors over, gone to shoot at my Exalted 8-bound. I then popped the neg 1 to wound strat on, which they're strength 5 shooting, so even with the oath, he wasn't doing a massive amount of damage to me. And then in turn 4, I was able to pick them up, pick up the Centurions, and he was effectively tabled in that turn 4. So really, really strong start. The big takeaways for me are that any shooting army is going to really struggle into the this World Eaters, the Vessels of Wrath, simply because we have so many ways to make falling back an absolute nightmare, and we're so fast that we can, charge you, pile into you, tag you, sort of, make your life miserable. It is worth noting, and I'll probably mention this in every video because I can imagine it's going to be a pain in the ass in every game, is that the TOs here have elected to not use any of the various FAQs that modify the rules for charging enemy units that are on the other side of a wall. So you've got the WTC version where you can basically get 2-inch engagement range if your opponent's on the other side of a wall. There's also been some various GW FAQs, in the various different editions that have fixed that. But basically, as it currently stands, there is no rule that stops your opponent from just placing their models 1.1 inch away from a wall and preventing you from being able to charge them at all. You have to go all the way around the wall. And that was really painful. There were several instances where he was like, yep, cool, these guys are 1.1 away from the wall, these guys 1.1 from that wall. This small unit of scouts is filling the gap in between, which means you can't shoot, you can only charge scouts. Whereas in almost any other format, I would be able to charge because the walls don't block the movement of infantry. So that was really frustrating, but I was able to navigate it by just going, cool, just gonna pick off all your small stuff, your scouts, your small units of 3 Inceptors, that sort of stuff, kill all of that. And then once that's happened, he then has to bring his big bricks out to deal with me. And when he does, he's not able to use that trick of being 1.1 inch from the walls to prevent me from doing any damage. So yeah, that was the first game. Really, really good game. Very happy with my results. And it's lunch break now, and then we'll get into round 2. Alrighty guys, there we have the end of the second round of Uprising 2025. I played into a fantastic Leagues of Votann player. We had an absolute ripper of a game. He had a really interesting list. So he had 2 units of 5 Terminators with the characters in each, and then he had a third character which was just running around on his own, another Terminator looking character. I'm not going to try and remember the names. Hearthguard, I think they're called. Then he also had 2 Land Forts, 2 Sagittars, 2 units of Berserks, a unit of Warriors that split into 2, 3 units of Bikes, a unit of Jaegers. I think that was more or less it. But yeah, really cool list. He used his Jaegers to screen me early. And this game, I got the win. It was a relatively close game throughout. There was lots of opportunities for it to flip either way. But I managed to get the win. The clutch moments were some Blood Surge moves for the Exalted 8-bound, where I was able to surge into him, into his Berserks, and then as a result I was able to fight them before they fought me. They fought on death and did a bunch of damage to me, but it just meant that I got to take them out in his turn, whereas if he had charged me, he would have just fought and killed me and I wouldn't have got to strike. So that was really cool. That happened a couple of times. So that was really good. And then what were some other really clutch moments? There was Demon Prince was really good. The 4-up invulnerable save on all those 8-bound was amazing. He just really could not chew through my units. And as a result, we ended the game with me having most of my Exalted 8-bound still alive, my Demon Prince still alive, and him effectively tabled. He still had his 2 land forts alive, because there's not much I could really do about them. Armor of Contempt was really good for him. So he still had his 2 land forts alive, but more or less everything else was dead. The stratagem to force desperate escapes when they fall back, I didn't get to use it, but the fact that it exists was really, really good. And this is something that I talk about often, is sometimes just having the CP and access to a stratagem is enough. Because it basically just meant he's got a big Terminator unit, the Hearthguard or whatever. Oh, he also had 2 units of 3 of the Dakar guys, whatever they're called, the ones with like the heavy weapons. But yeah, there was one turn when I basically charged Exalted 8-bound in, killed a bunch of stuff, piled into his Terminator unit. They've then fought and killed like 1 guy. And then in his turn, he's thinking about falling back. And I'm like, well, if you do, I'm going to make you take a desperate escape on a 3, like a 1, 2, or 3, you die. And he's like, oh, fuck, all right. And then he just decides to stay in combat anyway. Because he's like, well, I can't, if I fall back, I just lose the unit, so I stay in combat. And as a result, I didn't use the stratagem, but I sort of got the effect that I wanted anyway, which was that he stayed in combat and therefore couldn't shoot those 8-bound. There was a few moments that were disappointing. Things like 3 8-bound charging into a unit of Jaegers and failing to kill it. Demon Prince charging into 3 of the guys with the heavy weapons, failed to kill them. And I was starting to really feel in this matchup the impact of losing that +1 strength and +1 attack on the charge. You know, things like, you know, the regular 8-bound, which becomes strength 5, going into things like Votann, which are toughness 5, you really feel that the damage really just drops off a cliff when you don't have that +1 attack and the strength becomes relevant. It's not that big of a deal when it's only the attack that you lose, but when you're losing the strength as well, and it becomes effectively a -1 to wound debuff on your army, that's a real big problem. So yeah, I felt the sting on that. And as a result, those really tough armies, like the Votann are pretty tough. Khorne Berserkers going in and being like, cool, we're strength 5 on the charge. I know we do have a stratagem on Berserkers to put them to strength 6, but it's like, are you really going to spend a CP to do that? You know, it becomes a bit iffy. So yeah, really, really good game though. Fantastic opponent, and I got my 2nd win. So yeah, we're about to go into round 3, and I will update you guys on the results when they come in. So yeah, cheers. Alrighty guys, there we have the end of round 3 at Adelaide Uprising, the Australian ITC Championships. And I got my first loss into a really, really nice bloke running Necrons. He was actually the captain of Team Tasmania for the Australian New Zealand Team Championships. So clearly a very competent player, and he was an absolute fucking lovely opponent. That being said, he was really, really tough. So his list was the Awakened Dynasty, which I hadn't played before. Every time I've played Necrons have been a different detachment. But he basically had 3 units of Scorpek destroyers with the Scorpek Lords. He had a unit of the big destroyers with the character in it. He had Xeris. He had a unit of Immortals with character in it. He had a couple of those Hexmark destroyers, I think they're called, the guys with 1 billion arms and 1 billion pistols that Overwatch really well. What else did he have? He had a big unit of Wraiths with a guy attached, and a couple units of Flayed Ones, and that was more or less it, I think. And the mission we played was Corner Deployment, Raise the Banners, and Linchpin. And basically it was, if you watch the game, it was a real nothing, it appeared like nothing happened. The whole game I held my home and my expansion objective, or my safe objective, the one up in the top, and he held his home and his expansion objective, and we basically just kept fighting over the center. The problem was he'd win the fight. So I had 2 units of Exalted 8-bound in combat with his Wraiths and the Demon Prince nearby, giving them all 4-up invulnerable saves. And basically the way it would go would be like, I would fight, I'd kill 3 of them. He would fight, he'd kill 2 or 3 Exalted, but then he would resurrect his 3. And then, he had a fucking reanimator, the big tall guy, which I couldn't get to because he had it like wrapped and layered and all kinds of stuff. So I just couldn't get through to it. So I couldn't take that out, which meant every time I killed stuff, he would just bring it back. And so I tried to throw 2 units of Exalted 8-bound and a regular unit of 8-bound into his warrior brick, thinking if I don't kill it all in one round, in one fight, he's just going to resurrect it. So I threw pretty much everything I had, kitchen sink, and I bounced, couldn't kill it. And then he resurrects it all, and then basically, because he's OC2 on those guys, and I'm only OC1, and he was killing me, and there was also the terrain rules were really impactful in this game, where he was basically able to line flayed ones and line his warriors, his immortals, and line all this stuff further than 1 inch from the edge of the ruin, which meant I just couldn't get those charges in to sort of impact it. And also the terrain here, they've got like, it's not your WTC or even your GW standard like terrain. It's these big MDF triangles essentially, like not an L shape, like a big triangle, and the base, the floors cut across the corner. So things like a Demon Prince can't get underneath the floors, and it actually can't even get up close to them. Whereas on a WTC ruins, for example, you can get up close to the ruins, close to the edge, whereas the Demon Prince was fucking way back. So that was really annoying. And I could, because they're using the GW rules where you're, if you're 1.1 inches away from the wall, you're effectively unchargeable. You have to go all the way around. And you've got these big L-shaped, these big triangle-shaped ruins. I just couldn't get into him, which meant a lot of my models weren't getting into attack. And then when you factor into the Wraiths that like the Exalted 8-bound with their Eviscerators are strength 6. So if I was running the Berserker Warband, I would have been strength 7 on the charge, and I have access to +1 to wound, which means I'm wounding them on 2s. But in this detachment, I'm strength 6, and I don't have access to +1 to wound, so I'm wounding on 4s. And then also, in the other detachment, I'd get additional attacks as well. So as a result, it was just like the difference in damage output was, I felt it. I felt it really, really clearly in this game. Whereas just like those really tough units that you used to be able to reliably just kill them if you just full sent on them, you can't kill them. So you really have to adapt your strategy to go, cool, I'm just going to ignore that Wraith unit because I cannot kill it, and I'm going to go kill everything else. Yeah, so probably a few, minor to major misplays in the game that sort of stung me. Like going all in was probably a mistake. I probably should have just tried to clean up everything else. Even those Scorpec Destroyer Lords and stuff though, like the fact that he can resurrect them, that's one of the things that his detachment allows him to do, means I'd throw 6 Exalted 8-bound into his Scorpec unit, wipe it, and then he'd just resurrect the Lord. And then the next turn that Lord runs off and goes and kills some stuff. And now my Exalted 8-bound have to turn around and chase it. And because that happens at the end of the phase, I couldn't even pile into it and like force him to take Battle Shock or fail the fallback tests or do the Desperate Escape tests. So I couldn't do any of those tricks because it happens at the end of the phase. So after my Consolidate moves. So yeah, it was just kind of a perfect storm, realistically. And like, if you ask him, he'll tell you that I got diced because there was a lot of instances where I was rolling quite poorly. I don't necessarily think that that's true because there were some instances where I rolled well as well, but I definitely didn't feel great. He also clocked out at the bottom of his turn 3, but I was just like, look, man, even if I was a dick and just said, cool, you get to do nothing else for the rest of the game, he was still going to win because he had this big OC2 Wraith brick on the center objective, and I couldn't get to his home or his expansion, so he still was going to win. So I was just like, you know what, it's not worth being a dick. So I was like, cool, just have 15 minutes of my time, and we finished the game out naturally. And it was like a 60 something to 90 something, so it's a pretty big loss. But yeah, there's a lesson to be learned there, which is that don't underestimate the durability of Necrons, and don't overestimate the damage output of Vessels of Wrath, because it's not what it used to be. But yeah, that wraps up day one. So I'm gonna go grab some dinner, grab some drinks, and I'll hit you guys back tomorrow with round 4. All right, g'day guys. Here we have the end of round 4 at Adelaide Uprising 2025. I just played into a fantastic bloke playing the Grey Knights. He was playing the new detachment of the Grey Knights, which I have not versed before. And it's very interesting. You know, I thought it was going to be fine for me, because one of the main problems with the Grey Knights matchup as a World Eaters player, as we all know, is Mist of Deimos is a huge problem. And so is Armor of Contempt. Those things are both really powerful into World Eaters, whereas he doesn't have access to either of them. He does, however, have access to a few other things that are arguably more problematic. So his list was Drago in a unit of 10 Terminators. He had another character leading a unit of 5 Paladins. He then had Crow leading a big unit of Purifiers. He had another unit of Purifiers. He had 2 Dread Knights. And he had some Strikes. I think that was more or less it. That was more or less everything he had. So a really cool list, beautifully painted, a really unique 3D printed sculpts, so really, really cool. And basically the way the game went down was it was ritual. So knowing that he can uppy downy 3 units, and he had a stratagem for a 6-inch deep strike. So these guys are similar to your Chaos Demons, where they separate the board into 3 sections, and if they hold half the objectives, they can get a 6-inch deep strike within that zone. And the Purifiers, like a greater demon, project that aura. So he was basically able to do 6 uppy downy with multiple units, and 6-inch deep strikes with multiple units, which is terrifying when you combine that with the fact that he's got a ton of shooting, all of which is anti-infantry 2+. So very, very powerful. So the way the game worked is basically I turtled 2 units of Exalted 8-bound in Ruin, so he couldn't shoot me. And then I basically spent the first 3 turns using Jakhals, Berserkers, and regular 8-bound to keep up the screens so he couldn't drop on me and kill my Exalted and do my actions. And he was sort of pushing out a little bit, but he was also playing quite conservative. So early game, he killed a unit of 8-bound with Nemesis Dread Knight. They all fought on death and took it down to half health. And then the next turn I charged the other regular 8-bound in and killed it. So that was really exciting. First couple of turns, but outside of that, we didn't really kill much. He was picking up Jakhals, but that was necessary for me to prevent him from picking up the Exalted, so I just kept throwing more Jakhals out. It's one of the advantages of the list having 3 units of Jakhals, is I could just keep those screens up. However, by the time it got to turn 3, we had no screens left, so I was like, well, if I do nothing, he's going to up at the end of my turn. I went first again. If I do nothing, he's going to go up at the end of my turn. He's going to come down, and he's just going to a 6-inch deep strike on me, shoot me, and wipe me. So I sent all of the Exalted out. So I rapid ingressed 1 unit, sent out the other 2 with advance and charge, sent out the Demon Prince, and had a big nugget in the center of the table with 18 Exalted 8-bound and a Demon Prince, and Lord Invocatus was in there as well. So that was my posture. And when I did that, I killed the other Dread Knight, I killed a unit of Purifiers, a unit of Strikes, but he still had the big Purifier bomb, the big Terminator bomb, and a small Terminator bomb to deal with me. And then in his turn, he tabled me. And I was like, holy crap. When you've got anti-infantry 2+, meaning my stratagem for neg 1 to wound in the shooting phase does nothing, because anti-infantry is just unmodified 2+ wounds. So he drops down, he shoots, kills 1 unit. I can't Blood Surge move because I'm dead. Then he charges the Terminators in, shoots another unit, charges, kills a bunch of stuff, and he basically killed me down. So all I had left was Invocatus, a small unit of Jakhals on my backfield, and like a small unit of 8-bound. Everything else was dead. And I was like, okay, well, there's not much I can really do about that. Like, when you got a 4-up invulnerable save, 5-up feel no pain, yeah, it's as tough as I can make the army. And I held him, screened him out for as long as was possible to screen. So I do feel like I didn't make any critical mistakes in this game. Well, the only one that I would say I made was on my turn when I sent in, I charged 2 units of Exalted into his Dreadnought, fought with one and killed it, and then the other one I piled into and fought his Terminator unit. And my thought there was like, you know, I'm probably not going to wipe the unit, but I'll reduce its combat effectiveness, right? And then when he fights back, he'll kill a couple of 8-bound maybe. He'll be in combat, which means he won't be able to charge other stuff. But when I fought, I killed one, which he then immediately just resurrects with the Apothecary. And, well, not immediately, but, you know, in his next command phase. And then when he fought, he wiped the unit. So I was like, oh, fuck, I just fed you a unit of 8-bound and achieved nothing. But the problem is that was effectively me charging him and doing nothing, which means if I had have, you know, if he had had that unit right in front of me and I just charged it, it would have been the same outcome. So yeah, that was disappointing. It was a very close game the whole way up. We got to the end and I probably could have clocked him out. Like, we got to turn bottom of that turn was huge. Like, that took a long time to resolve because there's lots of feel no pains, lots of saves. We were using chess clocks. We got to the end and he had like 6 minutes left and he still had 2 turns to get done, turns 4 and 5. And I could have gone, you know what, I'm gonna make you play it out and you've got to roll your stuff, and then that could have possibly prevented him from getting a 5th turn of scoring. And that was a big turn of scoring for him. So I could have made it a little bit closer there if I really wanted to. But like I said, I'm not here to be a dick. I'm here to test the detachment and see, you know, what it can do. So I didn't want to do that. So I let him have that last turn. We scored the points, chucked it in, and it was like a 77 to 95, I think. So, you know, relatively close. He was a very competent player, very, very good. It's one thing I'm noticing in this event is that the average, like, I have not played a single, like, inexperienced player. None of the players that I've played would be like someone you would consider a hobbyist or anything like that. You know, normally at these 180 player events, you're going to play, you know, three or four good players that are here competitive, and you're probably going to play 3 or 4 that are, you know, they're just locals that come because it's the big event of the year and it's the only event they attend. Whereas the people that I've been playing are brutal. You know, round 1 I played Dylan Cowan, who is he's a member of Team Victoria. Then I played a bloke who in the previous round beat the New Zealand team captain for WTC, so clearly a very good player. Then I played the captain of the Tasmanian team, who's a very, very good player. And then I played another Tasmanian state representative. So everybody that I played has been either state or effectively national representative players. So really, really strong run at the start. It does put me on 2 wins, 2 losses, which is, you know, I don't need to tell you how disappointing that is, but we'll see if I can turn it around. There's still 4 more rounds to go, 2 today, 2 tomorrow. So I'll keep you posted. G'day guys, there we have the end of round 5 at the Adelaide Uprising, and I've got a couple of minutes before the next round kicks off, so I'll have to be brief here. I'll try not to ramble too much. Played into a fantastic bloke running Eldar. His list was very MSU. He had the Harlequins with Yvraine and the Vizark. That was one notable thing. He had Lilith, some witches, then just a ton of MSU. Reaver jet bikes, witches, Cabalites, a couple of D cannons, a War Walker, a ton of Venoms, all sorts of stuff. The World Eaters matchup into Eldar is normally really, really favorable, and I think it was favorable in this one, but it was actually quite a close game. We ended on a 99-point win to me to an 80-point loss to him, so it was quite close. There was a few really notable things. That unit, the Harlequin unit, was ridiculously tough. Like, it tanked a unit of 8-bound, a unit of Exalted 8-bound, charging it, and it's survived the whole lot. Even though like I was able to do some really shifty stuff with the charging it to avoid its fight first being that impactful by putting things like Invocatus into it so that the vast majority of the models would have to pile in and hit him, which would allow the entire Exalted 8-bound unit to fight without being, taking any casualties. But he was just tanking those 4-up invulnerable saves and then tanking the 5-up feel no pains to the point where it's just I wasn't killing anything. So that unit was massive problem. The rest of his army I more or less picked up without much difficulty. He shot the Demon Prince and killed him in one volley with some Scourges, which meant that the Demon Prince's 4-up invulnerable save aura was effectively not in use all game. So that was kind of annoying. And then there was a few instances where I was like, it was really hard because I didn't have any shooting in the list. So like he'd bring 5 witches on in my back corner, and now it's like I have to turn around and go get them, but then I'm jumping off of objectives. And that was just really challenging. This was one of those games where he had mandrakes and striking scorpions screen out my scout move. And because the scout move was screened out, I then threw Jakhals and Berserkers into them to kill him off the objective. I went first again. So I killed all of his screens, but then in response, he's picked up all of my screens. And now it means that going into those later turns of the game, I don't have the disposable units to actually go and do actions, to actually go and hold objectives, because every unit that I have left is something that needs to be getting into combat and killing things. So that was a bit of a challenge. So it was a very hard game. The score doesn't really reflect that because I still got a massive, a 99-point win. But of the games I've played so far, this might have even been one of the harder ones. I know there's 2 losses in there, but this one was very mentally taxing, playing around Phantasm, playing around fights first on multiple units. There was a lot of, real challenging problems that I needed to solve in this one. But luckily I was able to sort of solve them and get the win. So that's the end of my round 5. So I'm now on 3 wins, 2 losses, and we're about to go into round 6. I'll check back with you guys in a moment. G'day guys, back in the Airbnb, end of round 6 of Adelaide Uprising, day 2, done and dusted, and I played into an absolutely fantastic Chaos Space Marines opponent. Again, this was one of those games where the -1 strength and -1 attack by being a Vessels of Wrath was really felt. So he was playing Creations of Bile, which meant that he was having toughness 7 Obliterators and toughness 6 on his Chosen, which was the majority of his army. He had 2 big units of 10 Possessed, a unit of 10 Chosen with Fabius in it. Then he had a unit of 5 Legionaries with a Lord, a couple of Rhinos, unit of Cultists, Forge Fiend, Vindicator, Obliterators, Nurglings, and a few other bits and pieces. And that +1 toughness just really swung the math, because it meant that the Exalted 8-man with their Strength 6 Eviscerators, instead of winning the Chosen on 3s, they're winning on 4s. Instead of winning the Possessed on 4s, they're winning on 5s. And the fact that there was no +1 wound strat meant that there was no real way of getting around that. So, yeah, really felt that change. And the -1 attack also really felt. So one of the pivotal moments in the game was after some combats, I had 3 Exalted 8-bound piled into a Vindicator and spent 3 turns fighting it and failed to kill it, even though I had Bring It Down. So that was just one example of something where it's like, wasn't able to push through the damage. I didn't kill either of his units of Possessed, despite having hit both of them with a unit of 6 Exalted 8-bound. Didn't kill Fabius's unit until the battle round 5, despite the fact that I hit it with a unit of 6 Exalted. So yeah, just not having that extra strength and extra attacks, just really felt it. And you realistically, with the Vessels of Wrath, you're trading that, and in exchange, you're getting, the ability to Blood Surge move, which, in my experience, as soon as you tell opponents that you have it, they just play around it. So it doesn't really matter. The ability to do desperate escape tests, which as soon as your opponent knows about it, they just play around it. So there's lots of instances like that, where it's just like, I'm getting rid of things that are really premium, like an auto 6 advance, or a sticky objectives when I die, and in exchange I'm getting things that are very situational, and a quality opponent just never allows you to generate the situations that would be, relevant. So all in all, it was another one of those things where it's just like, I think this detachment's just bad. I don't think it works. It's not as good as the other one. It was still a very close game. He actually only beat me by a single victory point. So it was still a very close game, very good game. But yeah, there was just times when I'm charging Exalted 8-Man into things expecting to kill them and just not killing them, because it's like, well, when you have 25% less attacks, and then instead of winning on, 2s or 3s, you're winning on 3s or 4s, like all of a sudden it's a big, you feel it. It's big. And like, the additional blessing is nice, but if you play World Eaters well, in my opinion, you shouldn't ever really need the advance and charge. It's really nice to have it as a threat, and your opponent often has to play around knowing that you have the ability to get the advance and charge. But generally what I do is I sort of stage up, I position myself, I bait them out, and then when they come out, I have really easy charges because I'm just right next to them, And if you're playing it that way, you don't really need advance and charge. It's not like, oh my god, game over, I didn't get advance and charge. So, yeah, I think my conclusion, I've still got 2 more games to go, and who knows, I might be really impressed in those. But my conclusion so far on the Vessels of Wrath is that it is suboptimal. Still good, and it's a lot of fun. Being able to do things like Blood Surge move with your 8-man is a lot of fun. But into competitive players, they're going to play around it. And that's what I've experienced so far. So, yeah, that's more or less how that game went down. What other key moments were there? There was, it was kind of a roughly meh game. There was one turn when he whiffed with his Forge Fiend and didn't really do much damage. That was really exciting because of the 5-up Feel No Pain and the neg 1 to wound strat it came in there. So that was kind of good. He also had Cypher in the list, sorry. And Cypher is a massive problem when he runs into the middle of your army, just makes all your strats cost twice as much. That really hurt, because it meant, now Blood Surge is 2 CP, So, yeah, that was kind of underwhelming overall, and I feel like if I had been playing the 30 Terminators list in the Butcher's Warband, or Berserker Warband, I think I would have destroyed him, But, the other thing was, he had these big units of 10 possessed, right? And I've got 6 Exalted 8-Man. And I'd hit him and I'd kill a couple. And then he'd fight back and he'd kill a couple. And, we kept trading back and forth like that. But because he started with 10, he had just had 10 OC on the objective, and I only had 6. So I was never able to sort of push him over that breakpoint. Even if I charged a unit and killed 4, it's like, okay, cool, he still has 6 on there. So I haven't taken him off the objective, And then in his turn, he fights and kills 2 or 3, and then I kill 1 or 2. It's like, well, now he has 4 on the objective and I only have 3. So I don't take it off him. So the low model count on the Exalted 8-Man, I really felt. The no shooting I really felt, because there was a few instances where I charged 3 regular 8-Man into his cultists and killed him down to 2 guys left, and then he just runs away with them. And if I had shooting on Terminators, I'd be able to go, cool, this turn I'm going to move forward, I'm going to shoot those guys, and I'm going to charge these guys. Whereas instead I'm like, well, now I need to send something to actually go and chase down those 2 cultists, because otherwise they're going to screen out my rapid ingress, they're going to screen out my drops, they're going to be doing actions and secondaries, and it's something you can't just let that live. But at the same time, now I have 2 cultists, which is 10 points, and I need to send a 140 point unit of 8-man to go chase him. And it's this is a problem. So, yeah, I think it was a 68-69 victory points, or it was 64-65 or something like that. So really, really tight game, really close game, really fun game, very technical. But yeah, he ended up getting the win, so congrats to him. And we're about to go into day 3, round 7. So I'll hit you guys back at the end and let you know how we go. G'day guys, here we have the end of round 7 of Uprising. I just got paired into a absolute disaster of a matchup for World Eaters, which was a Death Guard army that had 3 units of Blight Lords with sorcerers in them, so neg 1 damage across the board, and Morty with strats to make him neg 1 damage, and my entire army is Exalted 8-bound that are damage 2. So absolutely devastating pairings. The game was actually really close, so I'll run through the rest of his list. So he had the 3 units of the Blight Lords, he had Morty, he had 3, I think he had 3, yeah, he had 3 Huntsmen, the War Dogs. He had a couple of Bloat Drones, he had another unit of, he had the whatever the Lord of Contagion guy is in a unit of Terminators as well. And then he also had a big unit of Poxwalkers with Typhus and a couple of units of Cultists. And then basically the way the game went down was he deployed everything on the line, I deployed everything on the line. He was going to be in a lot of trouble if I went first because sure, I'm not going to be able to kill him very much, but I'm going to be able to keep him boxed into his deployment. But he got first turn, which meant he was able to push his scouts out. I then used my scout moves to basically remain outside of his line of sight and outside of his effective combat range. And in his turn, he just advanced everything up into the middle. So he had cultists and stuff on objectives, advanced everything up. And then I was just like, look, if I don't have a go turn right now in my turn 1, and I hate having a go turn in my turn 1, but I was like, if I don't do that now, he's going to have another turn to push up even further, and then we're going to have a big fight happening in my own deployment zone, so that's bad. So I was like, cool, I guess I'm full sending. So I sent in the Demon Prince, sent in the Exalted, sent in another Exalted, sent in all the regular 8-bound, just threw everything into the middle, and there was this big fight in the middle. I fought first, killed 2 Blight Lords from 1 unit, then he interrupted, killed 2 8-bound, then I fought, killed like 1 or 2 from that unit, killed a couple more from the other unit, so total I killed 5 Blight Lords in that first turn with my go turn, and also killed a unit of cultists off the center objective, which got me some really good secondaries. He actually got really bad secondaries in his first turn, and failed to score them. So the turn 1 was pretty strong outcome. Then turn 2 ticks over to him. He got another really bad turn of secondaries. I'm pretty sure he scored no secondaries in the first 2 turns. Can't remember what he got. I'll put it up on the screen. But yeah, so he got a pretty rubbish turn of secondaries there as well. He also only got a small amount of primary. We were doing Scorched Earth, so he only got the 5 primary. And then we ticked over to my turn and I was on all the objectives. I got another decent turn of secondaries. In his second turn, he actually made a pretty big mistake by sending everything forward because he was like, he needed to reinforce these big combats that were happening, which meant that he'd left his home objective with nothing on it. And I had the third unit of Exalted 8-bound in rapid ingress, in reserve. So I've rapid ingressed them onto his home and I'm like, that's great, I've taken his home. So now he's going to get 0 primary in the next turn. But then he ripped a 10-inch charge with one of the units that moved forward and that they came back, hit my 6 Exalted and wiped them out. So because they weren't within the Demon Prince's 4-up invulnerable save aura, because they were rapid ingressed onto his home, he was able to turn around with them, made a 10-inch charge and killed all 6 Exalted. And then I had fight on death up and none of them fought on death. So that unit just 360 points and a command point to achieve exactly nothing, which was really disappointing. The combats in the middle, they sort of went back and forth. We both just slowly sort of chipped him down. He won one flank, I won the other. And then there was a few minutes where like the Exalted 8-bound fighting on death did a couple wounds to one of his huntsmen, and then, or stalkers or whatever they are, the ones with the 1 melee weapon and the 1 melter gun. I think they're stalkers. Yeah, so the Exalted 8-bound fought on death did some wounds to that. and then the regular 8-bound came in from behind. And even though they're winning on 6s in this detachment, because they don't get the +1 strength, so they're strength 5, they do have the full reroll wounds because it was below half strength, so I was able to kill that. And the end of the score was 63-61, so it was actually a really, really close game, which I'm actually pretty happy with, because there was that one really big swing with him making a 10-inch charge on my rapid ingress that, you know, you don't really expect that to happen. You know, that's pretty reasonable to expect him to fail that charge. And then also just the matchup itself is such a nightmare. With all that neg-1 damage, I just can't chew through him. He chews through me quite effectively. He chose the neg-1 to hit if I was in containment range, and he also had Nurglings in his army. So he was putting me at neg-2 to hit pretty much across the board, which means your 8-bound are going in hitting on 5s, you know, even Invocatus is hitting on 4s and 5s with his mount. Like, it's just so bad. My damage output just absolutely falls off a cliff, and his damage output is actually pretty reasonable into me. So it's one of those things where it's like, the main difference between our two armies is that he's actually better in combat because he's tougher than I am strong. But I'm faster than he is. But that doesn't matter when you have a big fight happening in the center of the table from turn 1. So it really just sort of was a really just tricky matchup. That neg-2 to hit is so brutal. But yeah, it was a really good game. I really enjoyed it. Great opponent. It does unfortunately put me on 3 wins and 4 losses, which is the worst I've ever performed at a tournament. And it just goes to show that some experiments just don't work, you know? And perhaps I should have experimented with this list more before submitting it, because perhaps I would have, you know, recognized the weaknesses instead of just going, you know what, I'll submit it, I'll play 8 games with it at the event, that's my experiment. Perhaps what I should have done is, you know, organized the weekend of games and got 4 or 5 games in with it, and then maybe I would have identified some of these weaknesses, because even this game was another one where I felt the loss of +1 strength and +1 attack. You really feel it because he's got all these toughness 6 guys, and I'm like, well, my exalted 8-bound, they're hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s, so you have a 4 open vulnerable save, and I'm only doing 1 damage with the eviscerators. Like, that's disgusting. And if I go with the other weapon, I'm hitting on 5s. So I was like, losing that extra strength is really, you know, it was essentially a neg-1 to wound debuff on my whole army. Like even the berserkers hitting knights, you know, normally they're wounding on 5s, but I'm wounding on, you know, 6s now because I'm only strength 5. And then also into things like I don't know, I just lost my train of thought. But yeah, so you get the point. I know I banged on about it a bunch, but you definitely feel that. Oh, the other thing was not having an access to a stratagem for +1 to wound when targeting characters means that when I do hit those combat bricks with a character attached, there's no way to buff my damage output. And not having access to neg-1 damage in combat means when he charges me, I have no defensive buffs. So almost all of my command points that I spent in this game, in fact, all of the command points I spent in this game were spent on core stratagems, because Blood Surge move was no good into Death Guard. Neg-1 to wound and shooting is no good when they have anti-infantry. You know, sticking objectives when I kill things, I wasn't killing things. You know, there was no good strats to be used. So I threw grenades a bunch with berserkers. I rapid ingressed a bunch. That's more or less it. Some CP rerolls on some saves. So when you're playing a detachment where not only did I sort of not get a detachment rule because I didn't get a +1 strength and +1 attack, and I didn't use any strats, it kind of felt like I was playing like even worse than just regular index. Like I was playing a detachmentless. The Vessels of Wrath, being able to pick 3 units to gain that blessing is fine, but so far almost every game that I would have needed, I want the advance and charge, I would have rolled it anyway. So, because when you factor in you've got Jakhals on objectives, you've got berserkers on objectives, it's actually not that hard to get the advance and charge when you need it. So I really think this is a comprehensive debunking of the Vessels of Wrath's detachment being good. But we've got one more game, and we'll see how it goes. I pray that I win it, because I need to go 4-4 at least. If I go 3-6, no, 2-3-5, that's bad. So yeah, I'll check back with you guys soon. G'day guys, there we have the end of round 8 for Adelaide Uprising. I just played into an absolutely lovely Genestealer cult player. Genestealer cult is not a faction that I'm super experienced in diversing, and I know there's a few different varieties of ways that you can run Genestealer cult, so I was a bit iffy going into this game. But it turned out that it was pretty much a complete blowout in my favor. The Vessels of Wrath actually really shone in this game, and it sort of made me realize that across the 8 games that I've played, the matches that the Vessels of Wrath have been really good into are the ones where your opponent doesn't have particularly tough units, because then losing the attacks and the strength, you don't feel the negative impact. Whereas when you're playing into those really tough things where you need to push that damage up, that's when you sort of feel the loss of that damage output. So his list was quite interesting. I don't know Genestealer cult units well enough, so I'm going to just describe them. So he had 2 units of 2, like the buggies with the guns, the las cannons, ridge runners I think they're called. Then he had one of them that had a mortar. He then had a bunch of transports. So he had like 2 rock grinders with the big fucking mulcher on the front. And then he had a few ones that were just the normal transports. Then he had, for units, he had 2 units of 5 Genestealers. And then he had just a shit ton of units of 5, like, dorks, and 1 unit of 10, like, guardsman-like dudes. And then he had a bunch of characters. So he had 2 of those gunslinger-looking dudes, the Wild West fellas, and then he had 1 other guy. I'm not sure what the other guy's thing was. He generated CP, I think, or something like that. Anyway, he kind of misdeployed in the start, where he basically put his Genestealers out to screen my turn 1, but he didn't screen it properly. He sort of screened one side, but he sort of allowed a little window for me to get around. And then I got the roll, I got the first turn, and I figured, you know, when your opponent gives you an opportunity, you know, be kind of rude not to take it. So I basically scouted everything laterally. Like, he didn't let me any scouts forward, but I scouted laterally. Then I took the +2 move and the advance and charge. Now this is another notch in the belt of the Vessels of Wrath, because I didn't roll advance and charge on my blessings for the first turn. So if I wasn't Vessels, I wouldn't have been able to do it, which would have made this game significantly harder. But got the advance and charge, so I was able to send those Exalted 8-bound around his screen, send the Demon Prince straight through, charged a bunch of his bikes and stuff in the first turn, piled into a bunch of his transports and a bunch of his infantry, and then he was kind of just one of those games where every turn I was killing everything that I touched, piling into other things. He would then inevitably fail one of those leadership checks, stay in combat with me, therefore he couldn't shoot me in his turn, kill all the stuff that I'm in combat with, freeing me up in my turn to charge more stuff and do it again. It was still it felt relatively close on the table, because he kept, you know, obviously Genestealer cults bringing the units back, putting them back into reserves, and then dropping them down on the other side of the board. So it was really hard for me to sort of keep up with him. I had to keep jumping around all over the table. But luckily my list has lots of disposable units like Jakhals and Berserkers that are actually surprisingly good into those Genestealer cults' squishy little 5-mans, which just meant that, you know, pretty much anywhere he went, anything he did, I was able to just respond and kill him off. So yeah, it's pretty good. Pretty happy with those results. I ended the game with all 3 of my Exalted 8-bound units still alive. One of them had 3 guys, one of them had 1 guy left, and the other one was untouched. Most of my Jakhals were dead. The Berserkers were still alive. The regular 8-bound were all dead. Demon Prince was dead. So, like, he killed a lot of my stuff. He just didn't kill quite enough, or didn't kill them fast enough. And as a result, I got a big 100-point win into his, I think it was like 30-something. So a pretty big win there. And that rounds out the event with a win-loss ratio of 4-4. So not great. It's actually the worst that I have ever performed at an event. Which just goes into like what I've just said before, is that, you know, sometimes when you're experimenting, you know, you should probably take the opportunity in the smaller events or practice games to experiment there and then bring something finely tuned to these big events, as opposed to bringing something highly experimental to the big event. And my end opinion of the Vessels of Wrath is that it's significantly worse than the Berserker Warband. It does have some really cute, neat tricks. You know, being able to Blood Surge is cute. You know, being able to force desperate escapes when your opponent falls back is cute. But ultimately, I think the other detachment just has the damage output and the durability to make it significantly more powerful. So that's my general summary, but I'll do a bit more of a detailed breakdown when I get home. We're going to go do the awards ceremony now, and then we've got an 8 to 9 hour drive overnight to get home to Victoria. So yeah, I'll talk to you guys when we get home.
Alrighty guys, I hope you enjoyed that. It was a hell of a grueling event. There was a lot of games, long rounds, long days, back to back, really hot, and it was just a really exhausting, grueling, yet exhilarating and fun experience. So I hope you got some of that through there. We learnt a lot. There's a lot of things that I would change. I guess now's a good time to sort of just give my general thoughts on the Vessels of Wrath detachment, having just played this massive event with it. And you will have noticed there was a pretty consistent theme throughout the games that I lost, and that was that the damage output on the units just wasn't quite high enough. You know, losing that +1 attack and that +1 strength doesn't sound like that big of a deal when you think, oh, well, you're getting extra, you know, blessings and you're getting, you know, the ability to blood surge and you're getting all these things. So it sounds like it's a reasonable trade. But the problem is it doesn't matter if you're blood surging into people. If you don't have the damage output to actually brick their units and kill them, well, it doesn't matter if you blood surge into them, because you're not going to kill the things that you engage with. Things like not being able to kill those wraiths in that Necron game, things like not being able to kill the Death Guard, you know, these are big problems that could have been solved in the other detachment, you know. So to take the wraiths, for example, you know, they're toughness 7. So if I'm strength 6 on my Exalted 8 bound with their Eviscerators, all of a sudden I'm winning on 5s. Whereas in the other detachment, I would be strength 7, so I'd be winning on 4s, and I have a stratagem for access to +1 to wound because there's a character in the unit, which means I'm now winning on 3s with my Eviscerators. So that sort of is a really big swing, because then it forces you to go, okay, well, I can't use the Eviscerators because they're not strong enough, so I have to use the Chain Fists, and now I'm only getting 3 attacks. Whereas in the other detachment, you'd be using your Eviscerators, you'd be getting 6 attacks, and you'd be hitting on 2s. It's a massive difference in damage output. And that's what I'm talking about here. Same go with the Death Guard matchup. Because they're strength 6, they're toughness 6 and you're strength 6, you're now winning on 4s. Whereas in the other detachment, you'd be winning on 3s with access to a stratagem for +1 to wound, so you'd now be winning on 2s. Big difference. And because of that, you end up going, okay, I'm going to have to use the profile that's strength 14 so that I'm winning on 2s. But now you're only getting 3 attacks and hitting on 3s when they have the capacity to make you neg1 to hit from their contagion, and then the neg1 weapon skill from the Nurglings means that all of a sudden you're hitting on 5s with those Chain Fists. You just can't put through enough damage to actually kill their units. So this was a really consistent theme that was a really big problem in a lot of matchups. So based on that, I think that the Vessels of Wrath is not a really optimized detachment for the World Eaters. I think you need that extra strength, you know, particularly if you're going Terminators. One of the reasons that I went with the Exalted 8 bound is because in this detachment, Terminators are only strength 9, and strength 9 is one of the worst possible breakpoints, because strength 8, you're winning T4 on 2-ups, and you're winning T5 on 3-ups. Strength 9, you're winning T4 on 2-ups, T5 on 3-ups. So you don't really gain any benefits there. However, you lose benefits into things that are toughness 9 and toughness 10, which is most vehicles, right?
So being strength 10 is significantly better than being strength 9. And even into toughness 5 things, the strength 10 is obviously better as well. So the Terminators going to strength 9 means that they're really not valid in this detachment, which is why I pivoted to the 8-bound, because I wanted access to those chain fists for the strength 14, thinking I'm going to need it in order to crack these heavy targets. Turns out, even with it, it's not enough to crack those heavy targets. So that's why I pivoted from the Terminators to the 8-bound, and yeah, it was just so stark. The contrast in damage output was really, really bad. So I think if I was to have another crack at the vessels, I would definitely be including Angron, because then you're going to be getting those reroll hits, which is going to put your damage output a little bit higher. One of the other things that's considered a pro for the vessels is that because you can pick a blessing and put it on 3 units, you'll always get advance and charge when you need it. However, the problem is, because you've lost the access to the auto 6-inch advance stratagem, you'll get advance and charge, but it's not really as good. One of the reasons that advance and charge is so good on World Eaters is because you can auto 6 the advance, which just means that you're getting guaranteed massive distance. Whereas if you get the advance and charge, but you don't have access to an auto 6 advance, a third of the time you're rolling a 1 or a 2 for your advance, in which case, do you really care that you have advance and charge? It's not that big of a deal, So all of a sudden you're getting these situations where it's like, yeah, I got advance and charge on my 3 units, but I rolled crap for the advances and I wasn't able to actually threaten that unit off his backfield. So the pro for vessels is that you can pick your advance and charge, but it doesn't really come into play because you can't combo it with that auto 6. And then there's other small quality of life things that really make the faction suboptimal, such as when you sticky objectives, you have to kill something to do it in the vessels, whereas in the Berserker Warband, you do it on death. That's actually a massive difference. Being able to just go, cool, I'm going to throw my Berserkers onto my expansion objective. They're out in the open. You could come over and shoot them if you want. But if you do, I'm going to spend 1 CP, I'm going to sticky that objective, and now I control it anyway, and there's nothing you can do about it. Whereas in order to do that in the vessels list, you actually have to push onto one that they already occupy and kill them, which means your opponent gets a lot of agency over where you can and can't use that sticky objective stratagem. So that's really bad. The fact that you lost the neg1 damage stratagem is also a huge problem, because it means that all of a sudden those Exalted 8-bound, even though I had the Demon Prince for the 4-up invulnerable save, people were still just charging them and killing them. Like, I lost the fight into the Death Guard, I lost the fight into the Wraiths. There was several instances I lost the fight into Grey Knight's Terminators. There's several instances where my opponent and I were locked in combat, and they walked away with models, and I didn't. Whereas if I had the ability to neg 1 damage, all of a sudden, on that turn when they fight me, they only kill 1 guy instead of 2 or 3, and then I'm fighting back with, 4 or 5 guys instead of, 2 or 3 guys. It makes a huge difference, especially when you combine it with the increased damage output in the previous detachment. The only thing that I will say is definitely a plus for the Vessels of Wrath is the Blood Surge move. Being able to do that was a huge game changer, and most of the games that I won were off the back of that. However, the games that I lost were ones where I told my opponent that I have the capacity to do this, and they just went, cool, I'm going to stay 7.1 inches away from you at all times. And I'm like, cool. So if they're engaging me with combat, Blood Surge means nothing, and anytime somebody was shooting me, they would just shoot me off the objectives. And in the previous detachment with Khorne Berserkers and their Blood Surge, it creates a really interesting problem, because if you're on an objective and they shoot you off, you can sticky it, and if they come near you to try to toe in on the objective and then shoot you off, you Blood Surge into them, right? That combo doesn't work in the Vessels of Wrath detachment, because you can't sticky the objective when you die, which means your opponent can just shoot you off the objective from 7.1 inches away, and now you don't control the objective anymore. Whereas they can't do that in the other detachment. So it just sort of doesn't work. All these pieces, they don't fit together quite well. What I think they need to do is swap the stickies. If this detachment had the sticky on death, and the other detachment had the sticky when kill, that would make a lot more sense, because then you'd actually be able to combo stratagems to do interesting things in both detachments, whereas this one doesn't really have that. So all in all, I think the Vessels of Wrath detachment is a ton of fun. It was really cool to play, and I really enjoyed it. That Demon Prince that can run through walls, he was legitimately amazing. He was very, very good. However, ultimately, I think the Berserker Warband detachment is just vastly superior. It's not just a little bit better, it's a lot better. And it's a little disappointing that it took an 8-round event for me to sort of really solidify my opinion on this, because it meant that instead of placing really high at Australia's biggest event, I sort of was very middle of the pack, which is disappointing. And I feel like if I had taken the 30 Terminators list, I could have done a lot better. But like I said in the opening to this, with the way that they were doing the terrain rules, it was going to be very hard for any World Eaters player. I think the highest placed World Eaters player was like 53rd or something like that, or 54th. So none of the World Eaters got anywhere near the top of the deck, because these terrain rules were just so punishing. And because of these terrain rules, there was very few combat armies, which meant even like one of our strengths as a World Eaters army is that we can like go fight on death, and then we can go into those combat armies and we actually just win the fist fight. But because the meta had pivoted so much into shooting because of these terrain rules, it was a shooting gallery, and the World Eaters all just got blown up. Catching up with several of the World Eaters players at the event, and every single one of them was really struggling because of these terrain rules. So, the World Eaters thrive on WTC style terrain. There's a lot of hiding spots, there's a lot of staging areas, there's a lot of, cover. And then also when you have some form of errata that fixes that challenge where you can come through a wall, that's a requirement, in my opinion, for World Eaters to perform at that top level. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that have achieved significant results with the World Eaters at events that have these rules. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just sort of saying it's one of those things that's a very strong limiting factor for World Eaters armies. Like in my game against the Creations of Bile player, there was this one instance where he had basically his possessed lining the inside of a wall, and I needed to go in there and kill him to get him off an objective, but I just couldn't. There was no way I could do it. So I came up close, and then he just springs the trap on me. I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do in that scenario. If I just sit there, and he just sits there, he has a Vindicator and a Forge Fiend, so he just sits there and shoots me all day. I can't sticky objectives when I die, and he just sits there and wins. So I was like, I need to go and dig him out, but I can't dig him out because of the terrain. It was very, very frustrating and very disappointing. But I did know that going in, so I'm not really complaining. I'm just sort of expressing the challenge itself so that you guys have a little bit of context for the games that we just discussed. So, with that all being said, thank you very much for tuning in. If you want to show your support for the channel, head over to blogforthebloodgod.com. You can pick up some swag like the t-shirt that I'm wearing. We've got objective markers, neoprene, we've got dice, we've got really cool stuff, and we've also got links to our Etsy store where you can buy 3D printed Terminators and Demon Princes and Dreadnoughts and all kinds of fancy goodness. And also a huge shout out to the Army Paid. I thank them for sponsoring this video. Make sure you comment below with which color you would like from their flexible triad sets, and one or two of you will be selected from the comments to receive a set. So with that all being said, I'm going to leave it here. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Walk for the Blood God.